Thank you.
Good. Okay, put it down. Good morning. Welcome to everybody. We are now starting our in public Welsh Ambulance University Board meeting. Welcome to anybody watching externally. And a reminder that we are in public. If we have questions from the public, we will endeavour to answer them at the appropriate time on the agenda. And if during the course of this meeting questions arise in your mind, those members of the public watching us, you are able to ask us those questions, which we will attempt to answer the next meeting. I always give the little mantra, I'll do it as per usual, to remind anybody watching outside, this is the end of a governance process, which starts with executive scrutiny, moves through to committee scrutiny, and finally here. It's not our intention to repeat the work of the committees. We will hear from the committee chairs as we go through, either at appropriate points in the agenda or specifically at the end, to make sure the board is made aware of any issues that the committees feel are serious enough for board attention. Any declarations of interest from anybody around the table on today's matters? Those? Excellent. Thank you very much. Item 3, then, the minutes for approval of the meetings on the 28th of May and the 25th of June. They're all in the board pack. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to correct anything on those minutes? Nothing seen. That's grand. Thank you very much. Are we all content to approve both of those minutes? You are. Good. Thank you very much. In terms of the action logs, there was one item only outstanding, which was for you, Johnny, I think. Are you going to give us an update?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll give an update on this one. So good news is the privacy notice has now been completed. So there's a few minor amendments that we just need to make following some feedback from our PECI team. So that is due for final review this afternoon. So we can look to close this one at this point, Chair. That will conclude the final parts of the DPIA that was outstanding.
Great. Okay. Any questions or comments to Johnny on that? Or content to close that outstanding item? Good. Thank you very much. Right. Item number 5, the chair and the vice chair's reports, papers in the pack, which we'll take as read. But both Kerry and I stand ready for any questions, don't we, Kerry? Any questions or comments on our activities over the last few months? Good. Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on swiftly to item number 6, the chief exec's report, and over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much. I'll take the report as read, but I just want to highlight a couple of things for you. So you can see that we had our first accountability framework meeting with NHS Wales Performance and Improvement, which was a good meeting. We remain in tier 1. Our financial stewardship is strong. A couple of things that I think we need to continue to think about this financial year is the greater clarity around commissioning arrangements. So we have draft commissioning intentions, but we don't have effectively a contract. So there's a real push for NHS P&I to have some kind of contractual arrangementship with JCC, which will give a view as well as to who does what for how much. And that would also enable them to have a better idea as performance and improvement as to what they will manage to us from a performance perspective versus a contract perspective. So I'm working quite closely with the MD of Performance and Improvement and our lead commissioner to come to some kind of arrangement for the new financial year. Questions as well around our quality agenda and specifically the things that we talk about a lot at board, which is our community weights. So the things that get categorised in the now and how we're attending to them, how quickly we're getting to people and the patient harm, of course, that there is when we don't get to them fast enough. You'll see from my report I've had a lot of MS Senate engagement. I've spent probably a good 2 or 3 weeks attending several summits and several meetings. It was a real pleasure to attend the Graduate and Primary Care Summit with our Exec Director of Paramedicine and our Director of People. And we did present to the ministers our approach to ring fencing the opportunities that we do have for our newly qualified paramedics. In terms of national programmes, there's a huge amount of work going on nationally, particularly in the urgent and emergency care pillar. Phil Clure, the CEO for Haldar, is the chair of the programme, and I'm going to support alongside him almost in a vice chair capacity. We've also got the newly formed Urgent and Emergency Care Improvement Board, which replaces 6 goals, which will be a narrative or a nomenclature that this board will be familiar with. And we've now been able to secure a seat not only for myself, but for Becky Jones, our Associate Medical Director, who is very influential in this space already. And I'm really delighted that Andy, our Director of Paramedicine, is going to be both the national AHP lead and our lead in terms of WAST for the new National Clinical Plan. So that's absolutely fantastic that we've got cover. You'll see that my national reach in terms of things like the Chief Fire Officer in North Wales and AACE work continues, and also the work that we started, what we call the Celtic Alliance, which is where the devolved nations of AACE have agreed we needed to do something differently together. So we, over the last few months, have created a self-named Celtic Alliance. And it was a real pleasure that we joined Scotland to meet some industry partners to look at emerging opportunities around the use of AI in our contact centres. And I'm really delighted that Johnny's leading that work with a number of partners and Scottish Ambulance as well, around what could we do together, what could be some of the things we might want to pilot, proof of concept. So really exciting stuff. It was a well spent time. Locally, I've been doing some tea talks, going up quite early for me, and meeting staff as they change over from nights to days. That's been really insightful. Progress against the hospital handover delays continues, and we've actually reached a point now where NHS Wales Performance Improvement have met both myself and Lee, my Director of Ops, and each CEO and their Director of Ops, and agreed plans for the winter. And on the whole, 95 compliance with handover within 45 minutes has been what has been required. Betsy and Haldar have a number of site-specific issues which NHS Wales Performance and Improvement are working with them to resolve. Of course, this is really important for us to mitigate some of our risks, and also that this is a step change in terms of us being brought together as senior leaders to be effectively held to account jointly by P&I. None of us have not noticed the heat wave, and you'll have known that we were in a critical incident, falls, heat-related presentations. We saw a huge amount of demand, but we've been busy helping with the national debrief around how we as a system at NHS manage the heat. We've got some innovations and improvements that we're doing to our clinical model transformation, and we've also got some areas of sort of QI that we're bringing in, but we're going to discuss those in the MIQPR, if that's okay. Finance, we heard today in our AGM that we've got some great work around the opening of some new facilities. We've had our very positive audit outcome and unqualified audit opinion. We've also had some benchmarking of our services from the JCC around how we spend our money, where we spend the money, and they produced a productivity pack, which we're currently working through with our commissioners around what's it telling us and what might be the things that we should focus on. And then people and culture, you can see we're doing a huge amount of work in people and culture in terms of us speaking up safely. We've been recognised by the Welsh Government, which is a really massive accolade. Congratulations to our Director of Culture Change, Angie, for leading that work. And we continue to work with partners as well. We had a great quality event that we attended last month as well, or could have been last week. And we had Dr. James Calvert, the Deputy CMO, come and do a guest speaking item, which was really insightful And he was hugely positive about WAST, our contribution to the system, and what more we could be doing, and how we are probably moving beyond some partners and particularly their expectations of what we can do. Good progress continues with 111 in terms of digital. And again, we're not, because I think we are our finalists quite often in the HSJ Digital Award. So congratulations, Johnny, for that leadership. And our refresh for our electronic patient care record continues as well. And then finally, as part of our ongoing changes in terms of director and executive oversight, I'm really delighted that Andy has been having executive oversight around the Quality, Safety and Patient Experience Directorate, with Penny Durrant acting in the role of an interim director of nursing. And of course, we will welcome Alex Nesta, our new Chief People Officer, on the 12th of October, which we will be back to being a full and perfectly formed team. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Emma, for that walkthrough. So questions to Emma? Anybody in the room? Yes, Jane.
Thanks very much, Emma. Can I think about, you mentioned around collaborative work, particularly with fire service and your visit up north. I don't know whether you could tell us a little bit more about that training facility. I didn't know how far down they were in terms of their business case, or have they got funding for that?
So they have a business case and they have plans, of which I saw the plan, but they do not have the funding. So they're seeking funding at the moment. The fire service can actually get loans, which of course is very different to the NHS Wales context. So they seem relatively confident that they will get the funding that they need, and ergo they think that they'll have a new facility in the next 3 years. So the question for them was, if we're building this facility, how can we use it for our blue light partners? And of course, I'm really conscious that Lee's doing a huge amount of work around Hart in the north. And are there any synergies? But they have not yet secured the money, but they have a very robust project plan, and all the plans are there for you to see if you visit North Wales. So it seemed terribly exciting. And they also told me they have an extra 10 acres of land near TLW if we needed it. So Chris, if we need 10 acres of land near TLW, I think it's up for grabs. But yeah.
Good. Okay, thanks for that, Emma.
A question over handover 45.
Yeah.
Are the plans this year different to the plans that were there last year, and how confident are we that our partners will achieve that 95% target or get close to it?
Yeah. Okay, so from my perspective, and I will invite Lee into this discussion, are they different? We have actually had sort of plans that have been shared and agreed with us. So I think that's slightly different. I think they've always had plans, but these plans have been sort of shared, and we've had a chance to explore them. Some of the plans do look different, things like adding additional clinical space for us to offload, that would be different. Confidence, I think confidence for me, I'm the ever optimist. So, I want to be hopeful and confident that it will be delivered. I think the proof, of course, will be in the pudding. And I think there's a piece for me with NHS Wales performance and improvement, which is what will happen if the plans are not delivered. Because last year, when we had a ambition and a commitment to deliver handover 45, although we weren't as close to the plans, I think, as we have been this year, when they were not delivered, effectively, there wasn't a consequence. So I think I would like to be confident. The piece for me that's missing is that understanding around what's the consequence the Welsh Government or NHS Wales P&I will place on the health boards if they don't deliver, because we can't do that. Yeah. Lee?
Yeah, I would. The only thing I would add is that I don't think before have I seen this degree of scrutiny from NHS, what is now NHS P&I, and I would definitely say that, given their engagement, there is no lack of clarity on the requirements, and they've been quite clear in their language. The prioritisation and the understanding of risk. So I haven't seen this degree from P&I before. So on that basis, I'm absolutely encouraged that it's getting attention. I just echo what Emma says in relation to proof ultimately will be in the pudding. Things are looking okay at the moment, but I'm reserving any excitement over that, as usually they can at this time of year. So the true test will be as we emerge from summer, begin to hit autumn. What's the trend at that juncture? So we'll probably have to bide a bit of time to see if those plans do have that bite.
Thank you. Well, I would just add, actually, from a sort of non-exec perspective, it feels a bit different.
It does feel different.
It feels that we're less of our own, and that the sort of central government and NHS Wales has definitely taken up the challenge of trying to make this happen. But, you know, as colleagues have said, the real distinction will be what happens if people don't read it. And I think it's also worth mentioning, probably for the benefit of people externally, which I was going to mention anyway, so I'm mentioning it now, that 45 minutes is only the first step on a journey. That, I mean, the ultimate aim is a 15-minute handover. Our whole rationale in terms of the financial planning and rostering and so on is based upon a 6,000 hours of lost time as a consequence of a 15-minute handover. We're still running at what, 12,000 hours, give or take. So actually, we're still losing double the number of hours that our business plan and our financial modelling and our rostering modelling and everything else is actually predicated on. Yeah. So the big question is, if people do make the 45 minutes, actually, for me, the real significant question is, how do you move from 45 minutes to 15? Because that's a really significant change. And until that happens, Wales is still in a position which is very different to England. I don't know where you are in your English role, but I guess you're probably around about 15, 30 minutes for handover times.
So it differs in different areas. Certainly in Nottingham, we do follow that 45-minute handover, and a significant portion do get handed over at 15 minutes as well. So yeah, Nottingham, it's a little bit ahead.
Yeah. So there's a long way to go. We must be competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the in the productivity pack that we got benchmarked us against the other 10 ambulance trusts, which is slightly difficult because our response model is different, but we were 11th for handover delays. So we have the worst handover delays in the UK.
And the public needs to know that. Good. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
An observation and a question. So it's really good to see the strategic level of engagement and influence in your report. I know I've said it before, but it does feel different, and great that Andy's represented in the national programme. My question was on 12, on the ACE work around withdrawal of care. So we've talked a lot about violence and aggression, obviously in People and Culture Committee, and on a recent visit to Vantage Point House, I did hear some pretty awful stories. And, you know, what is apparent is that in times of pressure, you know, our staff face a lot more challenges. And of course, the public are frustrated, people are frustrated, and it's very difficult. But, you know, I was given one example, which was the health professional actually being quite threatening with one of our call handlers. So, you know, I think that it's great to see that this piece of work is happening at a strategic, you know, collaborative level. And I am assured through People and Culture that, you know, we are focused on this. But I am concerned it doesn't seem that we're able to, and unless we've had great campaigns in the past, which, you know, Estelle has talked to us about, but it feels we need to turn the dial on this somehow. And so the awareness, the communication around that is key. But one of the questions that was raised recently, actually, and Colin was in the room, well, when do we say to somebody no, you know,
correct,
repeat people? And I appreciate, you know, if somebody is in desperate need and maybe calling us, there may be a whole host of reasons why that is happening. But we have a duty of care to our staff. And I think for me, I'm just looking for a bit of assurance that we are considering, are we doing the best we can? in this organisation, which I'm happy to take to our next People and Culture Committee.
Well, you've got three hands there, so if we start with and
Yes, and I suppose it's opportune because obviously one of the actions that came to us in People and Culture was about moral injury from Quest. So for this month's, well, next month's People and Culture Committee, I've tried to bring together all the strands of work that we are doing across the organisation to reduce the impact of that moral injury. So I think it was a really good challenge, Kerry, and I've been Penny around, obviously there's work we do under the wellbeing space, there's work around violence and aggression, but we're also trying to put together a listening to people programme development for staff who are having to deal with, constant feedback from patients and complaints. So I just wanted to give the reassurance it is going to come to People and Culture, but also just showing the different initiatives that we are trying to put in place all together is helpful. Then what we've got to do is measure the impact of those rather than just thinking, oh, this is just about violence and aggression in isolation. So I just wanted to give a bit of reassurance.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, I thank you for raising this because I think it's important that we continue to have attention on this particular experience for some of our staff. I think that, first of all, incivility amongst professionals of course, is concerning, but I don't think, well, I'm sure that the board would agree with me, any form of abusive, offensive, or language that causes harassment to our people, particularly in our contact centres, is unacceptable. And I say that as overtly as that, both so that our staff can hear it and so that our public can hear it. It's not acceptable. We've had some representations as well from our trade unions, so I just want to acknowledge that because our trade unions are also tuned into this, particularly for contact centre staff. So, and it's sad that that's despite campaigns, because we have had overt campaigns about the experience of our contact centre staff, and that includes examples when we have got all the way to prosecution and conviction for some of the worst and abhorrent behaviour. Equally, it's right that we have to recognise that in going further in our tackling of this, we have to acknowledge the potential for risk, because, of course, for some of our callers, there could be explanations for the way that they present. So there could be mental health, there could be learning disabilities, it could be they're condition driven. So there could be a number of reasons that can be very difficult to decipher when you're on the telephone. So simply, deploying a position that says we may cease engagement does not come without risk. I do think that being said, it's right for us to now contemplate how we can take our current position forward. And having just this being a very live conversation, I have just asked my team initially in integrated care, where I think the risk thresholds are lower, where sadly our integrated care clinicians and call handlers are experiencing abuse, to begin to contemplate what a process could look like. From there, we can then begin to understand how we might be able to progress that from integrated care and then into the emergency setting, because the risk thresholds, I'm sure you'll accept, might be slightly different. So I just wanted to share, this is a landing message for us, and I have now asked my team to start to give that some progressive thought and to think about where we can go.
Andy?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments so far on this one. I think that the challenge I think we have, and this is something we discussed at the Chief Paramedics Group on a number of occasions now, is that relationship between the regulator and the new professional regulator and the individual themselves. And so what we found from that, so I'll speak about the HCPC, what we found from the HCPC is, I think lukewarm description at best would be the description. Not a ringing endorsement for this, which I'm a little bit frustrated about in respect to that. The worry I have in that is that we could set up a policy and a process that we absolutely endorse as an organisation, but then that makes the individual vulnerable with their regulator. In that if there was a complaint, then if the regulator isn't on the same page as we are, then there could be an isolated then regulatory issue for that clinician, even though they were following an organisational policy that we endorse and support. So that's the circle we're going to have to square, I think, in respect to that, because what we don't want to do is just end up, the HCPC does not have a relationship with us as an employer. It has it with the registrant. And so therefore they potentially pursue a fitness to practice case against the registrant for actually doing the thing we've asked them to do. And that's the difficult when we're in this space about that, the withdrawal of care is how do we do that and then make sure that essentially we can support a clinician that is what is exactly the right decision to make.
I think the last thing I will conclude on is as you will soon meet, there's a new deputy CPO in the culture space, and I know her background is that she would have been the chair for managing violence and aggression in her last organisation, bringing in multidisciplinary teams to really think about how we manage violence and aggression across all of our services. To also meet, this is a health and safety executive HSE requirement on us, so it's a statutory requirement. So I'm hoping that individual will just bring some different insights and things that we might be able to think and pull work together as well, which is what Anne just described. Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? A couple of things I'll just make in conclusion, if I may. In terms of heat wave, more for the benefit of anybody watching externally, really. In terms of heat wave, you mentioned critical incident.
Yeah.
And certainly that was very much the case in all of the ambulance trusts across the south of England, where the heat wave had the most dramatic effect. Other ambulance trusts were going into critical incidents. They were going into the highest levels of acuity, I suppose. So we are definitely not alone. And perhaps more internal audience, can I ask special sort of congratulations message to our education team, because you made reference to the fact that we've had over 500 of our technicians through the advanced training recently, and the education team are real unsung heroes in the organisation, as are vehicle maintenance and many other unsung heroes. But the education team have been doing a fantastic job to move that bit of training through, which is critical to our kind of planning for double crew ambulance arrangements. So big thanks to them.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for this double check round. Nobody on the screen with hands up. So let's move on to item number 7 in that case, because there's nothing to approve in terms of your report.
No.
So item number 7, do we or do we not have any questions from the public?
We do not, Chair.
We do not.
But as I always say, we encourage them. So our next meeting will be at the end of September. So if anybody is watching who might want to submit them, then please do.
Indeed, and we definitely echo that. Any questions, always gratefully see you. In that case, we move on to item number 8, which is patient experience, and that's to you, I think, Andy.
It is. I believe we're requesting Leanne to come and join us because Leanne will be able to give us a little bit more of the background, but just to tee things up before we watch the video in respect to this. So we rightfully speak a great deal about the areas where we need to focus our attention on improving and how we deliver our services. But what's sometimes really important to reflect upon is the fantastic care our people do every single day. And today's patient story, specifically a heartwarming story from Lucy Burrows on behalf of AJ. So in this call, you'll see our attending clinicians focus on some of the simpler things in terms of how they manage this patient. And it could have been a very challenging presentation had they not done this quite so effectively. But their empathetic approach has really focused on the patient experience and in turn allow for the clinical care to be delivered as required. So I'll shut at that point and hand over to Leanne for the next bits.
And a warm welcome.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andy. So I'm presenting AJ's experience today, as was shared with us by his mum, Lucy. So AJ's story is a success. It illustrates how, when our staff work collaboratively with families to put patient at the heart of our decision-making process, it actually instills that sense of trust. And for this family, provided exceptional care, in their words. So why are we bringing such a positive story today? Well, I think it's important to say that even though we recognise we do a lot of learning when things go wrong, there is equal value in understanding when things go exceptionally well. And when we had Lucy's compliments, we were intrigued to learn more about AJ's experience, to find the story behind the feedback. And all I will ask when you watch the story is to reflect on how the family felt. Because for them, this is more
patient-centered care is more than just processes and pathways. It's how they felt when they were in our care, and especially the impact of kindness, listening, and seeing the person behind the patient.
AJ was born in Glangwili, 9 weeks premature. He wasn't breathing when he was born, so he had some quite severe complications. He's previously had surgery in Swansea for reconstructive surgery. Now he's got like a fear of uniforms, anything medical. So just attending like general appointments, going to the GP, he gets very distressed. He has seizures because like he gets so upset. He's got minimal speech now, but previously, before this, he was mute completely, and not everybody's been able to communicate with him in the past without words. He has got autism, ADHD, he's got PDA, he's got quite a complex things going on, which can make him hard, but when you find the right people, they do get through to him. But it's like having that connection. Like previously, we've had doctors say, well, if I can't touch him, I can't talk to him, I don't know what's wrong with him, and we've left the hospital in the middle of the night, like not aware of what's then wrong with him. He's amazing, and he's really, when you get through to him, he's lovely, but he's very defensive and he's very, very strong for his age. AJ's had COVID 3 times, which he developed febrile seizures. So once we get a high temperature, we know we're either on, AJ doesn't respond to paracetamol, so Calpol sends him through there's something in it with the sugar, affects his ADHD. So it's very hard to bring temperature down. So once we get a soaring temperature, we usually know we're going to end up somewhere. Rang 111 for some advice, but they wanted to send an ambulance. We waited for the ambulance. I think it was about 3.5 hours this time. But I can't fault the 2 men that come. I just explained briefly, he's non-verbal, everything else. AJ was very wary of them both, but they sat down, and before they tried to do any obs, they like showed them on hit on themselves but they like took a minute for AJ to process them being in the room, which like I've never had that experience before. Just that little bit of processing time kept him calm, kept him really thing. They showed him out the window that the ambulance was here. He got a little bit upset, but they told him it was fine because he doesn't have words to communicate. I think just in society, not just medically, it's some people, if there's no words, they can't communicate with children like AJ. But we're just very, very lucky that day. Both these men had an amazing, like, their empathy towards him. Like, they showed me a lot of care and consideration, which I appreciate because, like, I know what he's like when he does go. They managed to get obs, which nobody's ever, like, been able to do before. And I think that was a reflection on how they were with him. And when we got to the ambulance, they didn't shut the door straight away. They told him, like, again, they give him a little bit of processing time. When we arrived to Glangwili, I just felt sorry for the staff. So, like, we opened the doors to absolute chaos. Like, it was a weekend. I think the rugby had been on. There was a lot of drunken, like, bleeding people. There was ambulances queued up everywhere. They kept AJ in the ambulance where they got out because they said it wasn't suitable, like, to remove him immediately. But when they handed AJ over, I really, like, appreciated. They asked for a quiet room. They said he was scared, like, just a small one just to put him away from the noise. They handed over all his needs, and the man actually carried him from the ambulance all the way through A&E, and because AJ wouldn't stay on the bed because he was scared. The care and empathy that he received that day has really, like, helped AJ. He's been for surgery since that appointment, and again he had his obs done, which was something massive for us. And I actually think they've helped AJ for his future experiences, not just on that evening, because he was definitely better in the hospital. They can change, like, all future experiences. It's not just a reflection on that one. And they even brought him a little teddy in that to the room and come and said goodbye as they were leaving. And then throughout the evening, they've come and did a couple of like ambulance trips in and out, and they always popped in on him, and they were just really, really nice people, and I appreciated the care that we received that day.
So just to share with you, even though that's a really positive example, we've had quite a few come in since then, which I'm delighted to share with you, but we are doing some proactive work with compliments. Not everyone gets to hear when they're cited in a compliment. You know, we're really busy sometimes, and we've heard that very clearly. So we are working with all the teams in WAST to really ramp up the way that we capture, record, disseminate and learn. Certainly linking in with colleagues and people in culture around staff morale, you know, raising awareness. Who are our regular experience makers whose names keep cropping up? So the feedback we've had from staff has been they want that, they really welcome that. So that's something that we will hope to get some more detailed results over the next couple of weeks.
Great story. Great story.
Yeah.
And it was just occurring to me that the kind of empathy that person shows, you can't teach that.
No.
I doubt it's something that comes through NPQ training in a university degree course. It comes from experience and maturity and so on. So it's just a thought to bear in our mind about how we develop people, which is beyond classroom training.
Can I come back on that one, Colin? What really resonated, and there's a couple of points really resonated for me. The first one is what Lucy kind of talked about was two things. One, where the patient consultation didn't take into account that empathetic approach and the lasting impact that they had, versus the patient consultation that did have a more empathetic approach and the lasting impacts that's had. So not only was that care episode so expertly delivered as you kind of talked to, but now future care episodes are now better because of that positive episode. So the lasting impact of that care will go on into the future. And just to go back to that education bit around NQPs, some of you might know I used to teach NQPs for many, many years before I came to Wales. And there was always a phrase and a saying that I used to kind of tell people, and this absolutely nailed it. And it's people will forget what you said and people forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Absolutely landed for me in terms of that. So full credit to the crew and their attendance, because a really powerful story and such a good one to hear, when very rarely we kind of get into this space, because we always talk about where we need to be better. But clearly an example of that.
Hannah's been hand up as well. You just can't see it.
Oh, fine. Oh, right. Okay. So we're going to have an extra. Is that okay? And then we'll come back in the room. Hannah.
Really, really positive to hear this story, and very grateful to the family for sharing it. I'm actually going to come back at you, Colin, with a bit of a difference of opinion, in that I think that to an extent we can teach what those paramedics did, because what they demonstrated, yes, was empathy, and you know, we know that some people have naturally more and less of that, but they also had a really good awareness of difference and of the particular challenges that you might expect to find associated with neurodiversity, associated with particular disabilities. I know, for example, that our learning team at WAST works very hard to be a neuro-affirming space. So actually taking the opportunities to have those incidental conversations around how people might communicate with people with different learning styles even, or with brains that work in different ways, I think is really, really positive. And I suppose for me, the question would be, I don't know if we've had the chance to chat with the staff involved, but to understand, is there anything that they have found particularly helpful in preparing them to do such a good job with that young person? Yeah.
That would be really interesting, actually, to follow up whether that crew could cite an aspect of training they've received which equipped them for it, or whether they were equipped for it just by their age, maturity, and random experience which they happen to have had. It would be, but I take your point completely.
Thank you, Chair. Hannah's practically asked my exact question. First of all, though, Leanne, thank you for bringing that story. I absolutely agree with you. We can learn equally as much from a really positive story as we can from stories when things don't go according to plan, which usually is the version of the story that we listen to. The handout that's in our pack with this talk about this in some detail, I think, Colin, around that person-centred care. And for me, it's about how I know one of the actions is to embed that more consistently across the organisation. And that's quite a grey area of work, speaking as somebody that does that day in, day out in the day job. And how can we, and what are our plans to try and achieve that? Because for me, that's what AJ's story tells us. As has already been said, really, thank you to Lucy for sharing that. My eyes were filling up at parts, you know, particularly when she was saying how one of our staff carried AJ in. And not many staff might think of doing that, actually, because I think sometimes, especially when we're acting under pressure, we're almost a little bit robotic in what we do. This is how we support someone. These are the steps we follow. So what they showed, I think, is they stepped outside of the norm and they had a different approach when they worked specifically well for AJ. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have that type of approach with every patient we go to support? That's when we really are, I think, improving patient care in the community, because we are all individuals, we are all different. We don't need a label attached to us to make us different. We're different to the person next to us. So I guess the question is, you know, have we got any plans in terms of how we're going to embed that?
Yeah. So we've already shared AJ's story at the WAST Q event earlier this month, and it was very well received. We are working with colleagues around quality as well, working with training teams to try and share this. We did speak to the crew who responded, and in the tracker, they have given their insights as to what they did. You know, they were very self-depreciating. It was just, that's what they do. But they did acknowledge that some of that training and more exposure to diverse patients certainly gives them that confidence and that sense of awareness. So we are linking into the quality management group to reach into that. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. But what I will say is what we hear all the time, which is why we're doing this work on compliments. We underreport on compliments. The amount of, I mean, we've had, you know, 320 in the last couple of months. That's probably the tip of the iceberg. And these are people we're not soliciting for information. They go out of their way to give it to us. And some of the feedback is phenomenal, and we can't trace the crew because they don't give us enough detail. But when people are saying, my goodness, you went above and beyond, they are a credit to you. We know something's right because these are exceptional. And I don't think AJ's story is a one-off. We are seeing his compliments, but this is why we want to get to behind the stories behind the feedback, because we know there is a huge amount of learning as well as celebration.
Okay.
Thanks. But building on Hannah's point as well, and I was glad to see it in the presentation about the link to the training, but also recognising whilst mandatory training has been helpful, it's about how people apply it. But the point I wanted to make is thinking about the NHS staff survey, where WAST consistently scores incredibly high, is colleagues being prepared to go the extra mile. And there's empathy, there's compassion, but there's also the extra mile. And I think hearing you therefore say, Leanne, that point about you get a lot of examples of that, bringing that back to make sense of it for colleagues, because I often get asked, well, what does going the extra mile actually mean? And that's what it is. So thank you for sharing.
Okay, but go ahead.
I'm going to say one final comment to you, Bethan. This is a fabulous example, but it ain't isolated. I've had 3 this week. In terms of that patient-centred care, 3 individuals episode from 3 different individuals all coming. One was about an APP, one was about our wish ambulance, and the other one was who went as a ride out. It was actually from Sam in your team, who's just joined us, and so she went on a ride out and was giving compliments. And the way she phrased it, the combined age of this crew never came up to my age as well. There was 2 very young people who their empathy they were showing for patients. He was blown away by. So that's 3 in a week. And
it's amazing. That's how we celebrate this as well, isn't it? And perhaps that's something we should think about, not just always focusing on.
I mean, it's right, we focus on where we need to be better.
It is, yeah.
But we simply haven't got to.
Can't forget.
There's people out there every day doing amazing work.
Amazing things, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Beth and Hannah have said, I think it's brilliant patient experience. Really grateful to Lucy and to AJ. I think the work on compliments and how we can disseminate those compliments is really, really important. We work in such a difficult system, don't we, that actually, unfortunately, for a lot of our colleagues, wherever they are, out on the road or outside ED or, you know, in a clinical contact centre, life could be really tough. But I think what I know, particularly from my visits, is, and when you talk to patients and when, you know, people know that I sit on this board, and we'll quite often relay an experience, you know, about calling an ambulance or calling 111. And 99% of the time, the feedback is that, you know, the staff that I spoke to or the staff that I saw were absolutely fantastic. But actually we waited hours. So, you know, compliments, I think, in the system in which we operate are so important. But I think how we land them is, you know, it's a huge, how we get them in the first place, but then how we can land that in a way that helps people that perhaps having a particularly challenging day, I think is really critically important. So good, you know, for us to have a focus on that, I think. So thank you. Thanks.
Good, thank you for looking around. Just a couple of comments I'm making wrapping up, if I may. I mean, thanks for coming in. Pass on our thanks to the individuals concerned. It is interesting, isn't it, even where we get people complaining because they have had to wait an extended period of time for an ambulance to arrive, they then almost in the next breath say, but through when they got there were fantastic. So, you know, we're familiar with this, but it is good that we celebrate this. The other thing that goes through my mind, again, maybe more for public consumption than internal, because we all know this, although I think it's good for us to be reminded. I take it that this was, I'd be interested to know, what was it categorised at when it came in? What level of acuity was this call? I mean, they waited 3 hours, it would appear, for the ambulance. So presumably it wasn't a red, or it would have been somewhere in the ambers or oranges.
From the description, I'm going to go with it, probably yellow.
Okay. And what this just reminds me is that the bulk of the work that our crews do is not the kind of heroic, sexy, exciting stuff you see on telly with the blue lights going and the sirens and everybody rushing to save a life. Actually, it's day-to-day working with patients with long-term issues who actually become quite regular patients in many cases. It's entirely likely that ambulances are going to be quite regularly called for this individual probably throughout their lives. And that's actually what the ambulance service does for the majority of their day-to-day experience, and will do more of as the ambulance service starts to fill more and more the community needs, which are becoming less available through primary care and so on. And as hospitals seek to discharge more and the NHS moves to shift left and get more work in the community, we are going to be doing much more of it. It's good to shine a light on what is actually the real bedrock of what the ambulance service does, rather than the TV programme to kind of glamorise the call centres and glamorise the blue light stuff. But that's not really what we do is. Good. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to 8.1, which was a follow-up from a previous discussion. And Angie, I think you'd give us some follow-up.
Yes, just a brief update. It is in the pack, but just to say, Nick Anderson, if you remember, who came last time to talk to us, continues to do amazing work. She's particularly proud to share with us that she's designed and implemented the new enhanced community first responder programme, and we have 8 new colleagues working in that programme, and she will be presenting at our Leadership Connect conference in September on Civility Saves Lives. So great news.
Great, good. Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on through the agenda. We've got a lunch break planned for 1 o'clock. We'll see how much we can get through before we get to 1 o'clock. Item number 9, Trish, is with you. Good governance report outcome.
Thanks, Chair. So this report represents our 2025-26 Board Effectiveness Review undertaken by the Good Governance Institute, GGI. The headline message, as you'll see, is a positive one. The review concludes that we are a good board with the potential to be a really good board. Importantly, it identifies no fundamental weaknesses or failings in how the board operates. The report does highlight a number of strengths that will be familiar to us around this table and others. These include our healthy and constructive board culture, the strong use of patient and staff voices in our discussions, quality of papers and governance process and the collegiate approach of the executive team, as well as that increased maturity of risk and assurance arrangements. As with any effectiveness review, there are always opportunities for improvement. However, the report, as I say, is less about fixing problems and more about making focused and deliberate shifts that will help the board operate with greater clarity, confidence, and impact. So the report contains 6 priority areas and 28 recommendations, many of which are interdependent and capable of being addressed through a smaller number of coordinated programs of work. Importantly, much of this was already recognised by us and work is already in train. So in many respects, this report provides that external validation of the direction of travel we've already begun through the Integrated Governance Programme and helps us really sharpen our focus on where the greatest impact can be achieved. So the first 2 priorities are likely to make the greatest difference to the board in the short term. The first is resetting committee structures and ways of working, with the second being ensuring that strategy provides that framework through which our discussions, our prioritisations and decision-making is shaped. A key theme throughout the report is the need to increase our focus on strategic delivery, outcomes and risk while reducing time spent on operational detail at board and committees. The report encourages us to use the strategy as the reference point for our discussions, our decisions, our trade-offs and our prioritisation. Members will see that we've already started moving in this direction through the revised IMTP reporting arrangements that went to Finance and Performance Committee last week and are on the board today, as well as the refreshed MIQPR, which strengthen that link between those strategic objectives, their delivery, the outcomes and accountability. So I think we've already started on that road. The report also endorses the direction already considered by the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee in relation to committee reform last year. However, it's clear that effectiveness depends less on that precise committee structure adopted and more on that clarity of purpose, the defined responsibilities and disciplined behaviours. So probably less about the mechanics and more about the dynamics. That's why we started to develop the design principles for committee, and we socialised that at board development that we had last month. There's a recommendation there to strengthen assurance arrangements below the executive leadership team, and that work has also been progressing since probably late last year. A task and finish group has been considering how best to refresh our governance forum structures, ensuring that operational and strategic matters are discussed in the right forums with clear escalations and assurance routes. Recommendations will be brought to the executive leadership team in the autumn, but the group has been reporting after each meeting throughout. I think this work is really critical for the success of those 2 preceding priority areas, helping to ensure that operational and strategic detail remains at those appropriate forums with that clear escalation mechanisms and clearer assurance routes into the ELT committees and board. The review highlights opportunities to strengthen the quality of reporting by placing greater emphasis on insights, trends, implications, learning, causation, and risk. That is a bit of the holy grail of any board, I think, is to make sure that there is less volume and more insight, what Bethan often calls the so what. And whilst there's longer term work through strategies, there are some short-term opportunities through some strengthened report writing guidance and expectations, and also the increasing use of the SPC charts and trajectories within the MIQPR will also support that greater focus on understanding performance rather than just simply describing it. The report also identifies an area of underdevelopment at the board around digital data and future readiness. And whilst we already respond to development needs identified through our annual board and committee effectiveness reviews, this really points to that need for a much more focused program of development in these areas. The board skills matrix that is currently being completed will help us to identify these and some other strengths and gaps and shape the future development, drawing on both internal and external expertise and input. Finally, The report highlights the importance of creating more protected time for strategic thinking and refreshing our approach to board development. The changes we're making to board agendas, the reporting arrangements and the committee structures will help to get that space. And we've got a new chair joining the organisation in October, so there will be an opportunity to refresh that board development approach in collaboration with the new chair and around some more future priorities. So I think overall, the report provides assurance that we're operating from a position of strength. It recognises the progress we've already made. It confirms many of the improvement areas we already knew about and that we're in train, and provides a clear roadmap for further improvement. There's a really helpful maturity matrix right at the end of the report after the survey detail, and I think that's one of the first things that would be good to do in a board development program, because it takes those 6 priority areas and plots our maturity. I think while all 6 priority areas will be progressed over the next 12 to 18 months, some of those changes are going to naturally take longer to embed than others. Many of the recommendations require not only structural change, but also changes in behaviours and changes in ways of working, not just for the board, for the organisation generally, and they're going to take some time to fully realise. It's also important to recognise this program of work is not in the current IMTP, so we need to make sure that we're balancing delivery alongside other organisational priorities and commitments. Last point, the action plan is going to have to be proportionate and realistic, focused first on those changes that are going to have the greatest impact. And we're going to be presenting an action plan through to the Audit Committee in September. And I'm proposing in this paper that it is ARAC that oversee the implementation and progress on behalf of the board. They have a role in ensuring that the board is organised in a way that it can meet its strategic objectives. So I think this sits very firmly in their remit. Thanks, Chair.
Good. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Yes, Johnny.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really welcome the view on the digital maturity at board. I think timing was something that came to mind here. I was thinking we're at that technology revolution stage now, so that the pace of this is starting to grow somewhat, and we're starting to move away from just digital products and projects into it being really embedded critical infrastructure. I think tied with that, the awareness around our engagement and connection with suppliers, both from a commercial perspective, but from resilience obligations and needing proper exit strategies where good will be really important for the board to understand. I think some of the work that we'll plan and bring through will be around that definition of what good looks like and setting our ambitions right, so that ambition to our digital data and AI strategies. Lots of exciting work to do here, but I can't emphasise enough how important it is that we get that bit right at a board level. I think it's going to be vital for us, Chair.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Yes, Lee.
Thanks. I think it's a really good report. I suppose I had a question about one of the priority areas related to data and innovation. Obviously, some of these changes can happen naturally without resources, but I think some elements will need investment. And how are we going to manage that within our existing resources and the need to save?
Mm-hmm. As a question, because I think it's a question, the only way we are going to be able to invest is to save elsewhere, which is what we know that we signed off as a board this year when we decided we would invest in, our response to Manchester Arena and continue to support our new clinical model with additional clinicians and other items which would support the embedding of that. I think there is there is a new innovation type funds that Welsh Government put that might have a digital name on it. I think the only way we'll be able to invest in some of this agenda will be we will have to save it from elsewhere.
And we'll be coming on something else.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I mean, I'm really delighted to see this report, and my thanks go to the Good Governance Institute for working so closely with us. I think colleagues found it quite a productive and constructive process. It's great, isn't it, to know that you're a good board? It could be great, so we all want to be great. So let's, how do we work on that? So I think for me, what
really resonated with this report and gave me some sort of assurance is around the trajectory that for me has been, how do we as executives start to push down the responsibility, accountability and operational matters to the right levels below us, rather than constantly things being brought up. And my colleagues will know I often say, why are we seeing this? Why are we seeing this? Do we need to see this? A bit like the so what question that you have, Bethan, because I think as well it's about creating a culture where the power doesn't sit at the top as well, which I think is immensely important for me personally. So I definitely see this work as supporting those journeys. So things like strengthening that assurance route below us and then working on our committees, are we actually using our time looking at the right things, which should be the strategic things? Are we delivering our strategic objectives? What are the risks of that and how are we mitigating that? So I welcome all of that. And I think I can't quite remember how you described this, Trish, but there is going to be some real challenges for us as individuals because we do love the things that we love. And we do love detail. And I think you described it as, we're going to need to challenge ourselves and one another that actually this doesn't need to be done anymore here. It can be done somewhere else. But also mindful that we don't want to end up as a board, which I don't believe we will because we're a good board, that we take reassurance and not assurance, because we see a lot of evidence around us over the last probably decade of boards that have really lost the detail to an extent that they've maybe accepted reassurance, and then we get pretty awful organizational reviews of clinical errors, poor practice. So I think we absolutely have to challenge ourselves and not be too risk averse that could happen to us, but make sure we build the mechanisms in a way that gives us assurance on those critical things. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Good. Just looking around. Any other hands? Oh, sorry, Jane.
Yeah, I mean, picking up on Emma's point in terms of that, and I think it is around then the dynamics, isn't it? It's making sure that we don't lose sight of the challenge on some of that. When I read the report, really helpful, good piece of work by GGI. I was going to ask about dependency and sequencing of your plan, because Trish knows I love a plan. It's the program person in me, but you covered all that. So thank you. And I think we do have to have a dose of pragmatism and realism about what can be done in terms of this. So in terms of where we do spend it, so a little label along each action on that. What is this going to cost in terms of someone's time or the opportunity cost? If they're going to do that, then they can't do something else. So, we're absolutely, I think, ready for that. For me, what I'm interested in, so absolutely right, I think our act's the place for it to be. I think I'm interested in Trust Board, yes, in seeing that progress, but differentiating, I think, what are the things that have got an action and a firmer timeline, and great, we can tick off, and others that are actually become a slow burn, which will ultimately develop into business as usual. So I think perhaps, I would invite you to make that differentiation, because otherwise it's going to feel like a programme that goes on forever. It's constantly reinventing itself.
I agree. And I see Eric bringing the plan at a high level through, but then monitoring it. For sure, there will be those. I mean, every year after an effectiveness review, we have a whole raft of things that my team and others do. So we're certainly used to that cyclical piece, but there has to be an end date for some of this. And I know that I think what's key as we bring it into ARIC, either in this first iteration or the next, is what are the success factors? And I think we've got a lot here on what the success factors are, because if we're just doing more of the same, then we're just wasting time. So I want to spend a little bit of time to make sure that we can look back and see what the benefit is and actually it be really tangible. So that's just taking a little bit of time to work through, but I think it's really key that ARIC keep an eye on the outcomes.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay, I think that's it. So we just turn to the recommendations. We note the report. We're asked to endorse the 6 priorities, agree the implementation of the recommendations, and agree the oversight of the implementations in the way described. So all content to accept those? Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Look, let us turn our attention to Chris. Are you ready, Chris, to take us through your finance paper, which you were scheduled to do in about an hour's time, but we could fit it in before lunch
yes.
if you
Good, isn't it?
are able to do that. So can we turn to you for item 10 then, Chris, for the financial report month 3?
Absolutely. Thank you, Colin. So presented to you is what I would probably describe as the first real reporting of our financial position in year, isn't it? Because, we last time saw a month 1, which was an initial snapshot, obviously, of where we were coming into the year. But you now have in front of you the month 3, the post Q1 reporting of our financial performance in year. This is obviously another example of one of those items that has already received a reasonable level of scrutiny and attention as it was presented in some detail at Finance Performance Committee last week. This is a more detailed write-up of that. Good delivery. Currently, as you can see, we continue to balance and forecast a break-even position for the year end based on the balance plan that we approved at board and the budget we set in March. I think it's important to sort of note some of the caveats and some of the movements that we're seeing already within the year, though, around some of that. In particular, some of the assumptions that have emerged since then around some of the spend within our forecast baseline this year, including particularly the Welsh risk pool and the current position, which we continue to get assurances from government on in relation to that, and then that knock-on effect of that on some of the other parts of delivery within our plan. Particularly around some of the savings delivery and requirement in year and some of the future profile of that as we come into Q2 now and beyond. And also, of course, alongside that, we're seeing some significant cost pressures that weren't necessarily able to be recognised within the plan as we set it, in particular around fuel. So we're seeing some variances. There are some variances even within a bottom line reported position, as you will see within the plan. Not significant ones necessarily yet, but the fuel in particular remains volatile, and we're continuing to track the impact of that. But offsetting some of that, obviously, there hasn't necessarily been much of a call yet in our bottom line reported position. We haven't needed to feed or factor in much of our contingency as yet into some of that as well. So there is a little bit of flexibility within that as well. The paper sort of clearly articulates exactly as we report our position into government. You've got separately the monetary returns that we submit directly into government, and you've also got some of the risks that we continue to articulate and quantify in some of those returns into government as well. Finally, the ELT meeting, we've got a session planned next week now to update our plan post that Q1, including already this early in the year, seeing what that looks like in terms of updating our forecast and line of sight of continuing delivery of that between now and the end of the year. Key areas we'll be focusing on that include our savings delivery and not losing sight of the fact that actually some of the profiled additional savings in our original budget setting will be kicking in from month 4. But like I say, we've got some offsetting elements to that we need to consider as well. In-year cost pressures, as I've mentioned. The variations, though, because not all one way. There will be things going the other way. There will be a little bit of potentially some slippage in some of the expected spend we saw or expected to come through. Some other delivery of savings and acceleration of the profile for the first quarter that we need to factor in how sustainable some of them are as we go through the rest of the year. And like I say, the impact of the contingency we hold as well. So I guess the summary is so far so good. But as ever, the risks to challenge, the pressure on the delivery of this, is greater than ever. The focus and attention and scrutiny we put on it as a result is as great as ever. But as I say, we are delivering so far. We've got a line of sight to deliver our plan, but we've got some work to do as an exec team and others next week and beyond to make sure we continue to be in that position going forward. That was all I was going to say, Colin, at this stage. As I say, we did have a reasonable discussion around a presentation of some of this at F&P last week as well. But as ever, obviously happy to take questions.
Good, thank you, Chris. Good news so far, as you say. Only a quarter in, but longer to go yet for the year. Yes.
Yeah, just that highlight. The Welsh risk pool money. Of course, we won't know that it is landing until it lands, and it seems that will be late into the financial year. what we are, and just for assurance and reassurance, the execs are not saying, oh, well, we're going to get that, so that's, you know, less money we need to have of our savings, because the reality is that the savings we've identified of 9 million are the majority of recurrent, and we know that we need to go into next financial year with those recurrent savings, because, you know, we will, if we don't, we will end up with a bigger ask next year. So just assurance, reassurance that for us, the foot's still on very much on the pedal, and, you know, to deliver that 9 million, because if not, we are just storing up, I believe, more pain next financial year.
No,
yeah, and I think that's been the approach that Chris has had as well with all budget holders.
Good. Any other questions? Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, and just confirming, looked at this as usual detail with Chris, and thanks to Chris again and his team for his reporting. I think one thing that we did absolutely tease out was confirmation of this. The savings we are looking at are the current ones. There was a little bit of confusion at one stage. No, well, actually, is this sort of just in year? And I was reflecting on this, having seen some of the recent comments by the outgoing Auditor General around the NHS finances more broadly, and his comments around the focus had been on just in-year savings and how that could not continue. So I think reassured from that on seeing some of the external perspective as well. And I think it was just really brought out then around, you know, the need for the future financial sustainability and the work, you know, that's connected to that. But no, really helpful reporting.
Good. Any other questions or comments to Chris? We're asked to note various aspects of the paper, which we obviously duly do. Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you all.
Well, in that case, I think let's take our lunch break now. It's inconvenient time to do that. So shall we meet back here after the lunch break at 25 minutes to 1:35? It's just over the 40 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back everybody to the second part of the public board meeting. So we are on item 11, integrated medium-term plan update, and this is for assurance. And Matt, you are going to deliver this on behalf of Rachel. So over to you.
Thank you very much. So this is a assurance and noting paper covering 4 areas. So the Welsh Government review, Q1 delivery, the committee assurance model, and CMT. I'll focus on the headline and exceptions, and then invite any questions that colleagues may support me with as well. So the IMTP contains 47 deliverables, 37 in directorate plans and 10 in the CMT programme. And at Q1, 31 or 66% are green and are on track. 1 is complete following launch of the single RICS clinical queue, and none are currently rated as red. FPC received the report positively, noting its evolution and confirmed the right level of detail and assurance, with some minor changes recommended. At the date of the paper, no formal request for any material change has been received from Welsh Government, although we are expecting a review sort of around the July time. The positive headline needs balance. So 10 deliverables are at monitor status and 4 have low delivery confidence. 2 of which are must-do commitments, so operationalising the emergency ambulance skill mix review and embedding a person-centred learning-focused concern system. The other 2 concern the MPDS CPSS pilot and the Medicines Management Hub, which remains subject to resource and funding. The common thread is around organisational capacity across a heavy Q1 to Q3 portfolio, alongside leadership, digital, technical and health board dependencies. So the agreed response at Q2 is a Q2 review led by our business planning partners in collaboration, with our directorate leads to reprofile or pause non-essential work and protect the critical delivery. So the main assurance point around that review will be to look at the timetable, ownership, decision rights that sit alongside what we continue to prioritise and protect. CNT remains broadly positive, moving forward, moving towards a benefits realisation, closure and transition. 4 areas are cautionary. So remote integrated care, urgent community response, change management and benefits realisation. And they reflect capacity, data, rostering, software and system dependencies that must remain visible as work moves into BAU. So from Q2, in terms of assurance, from Q2, assurance around the IMTP will be routed by strategic objective to the relevant committees. So with SDB retaining the full view and board receiving SO4 and the composite overview. So this should help to sharpen scrutiny, and the next development of this is to integrate strategic risks and more mature digital reporting that will support the IMTP as it develops. So the formal ask is that the board notes Q1 progress of the paper, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. Is there anything you want to add from an FPC perspective?
I wanted to say we saw the full pack. It was warmly welcomed. Well, I would describe mine as red hot. I was very excited, and anyone knows who's in FPC in terms of that, because it was really coherent and it was very visual and it was very strategically focused. And I think, as we say in the treble A, is about strengthening that committee oversight and the grip on delivery. So I think those were really pertinent words. Definitely a significant step forward, I think, in terms of supporting the assurance and enabling that future integration. I think we've got planned in line with the integrated governance, Trish. So yeah, very much warmly welcomed by FPC.
Okay, thanks very much, Jane. So any questions or observations, Trish?
No, I was just going to thank James Houston and his team for this sort of reporting. It's really quite different to what we've had before and really aligns with what we're trying to do to lift up the board to be more strategic. So the board sees all of the strategic objectives, sees the outcomes through the MIQPR, whereas the board deep dives into that and escalates up. It sets us up really perfectly, and it hasn't been a simple piece of work. So I applaud him and his team because it's really easy, as you say, it's really easy to see. So thank you.
Thanks, Trish. We could formally note that for James on the minutes. Emma.
Yeah, I just a question then from a committee perspective, where we've got low confidence and things are rag rated. I'm assuming committees will pick that up almost in the format of a deep dive or an exception report, because that kind of feels where, again, that heavy lifting needs to be done, is that this gives us an overview as a board, and from this we go, let's explore that, put it into that committee. So Bethan, I know you've got the complaints one,
and we did discuss that, didn't we, as FPC, Jane? We said that we would do exactly what you've just said there, Emma, because there are one or two that are relevant to Quest. So yes, we'll do that detailed discussion there.
Right. Bonnie.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make 1 point on assurance and 1 point just for us to consider, drawing a link to the earlier conversation. One of the things that came through there is the footprint on data and digital. Of course, I'm going to say that, but I think it's how we manage that. So we launched this week our digital oversight group. So this is the first step towards us having that helicopter view of all digital initiatives in a single place to start doing some of that prioritization and scoring back to our strategic intentions. I think one of the important things is, and we'll tease this out to the delivery group, is how we bring the right level of metrics and oversight up through to board. That will mature over time. I think the other thing just to call out, as we start to get into a better degree of board maturity in digital, we'll be starting to think around conversations around things like bias, ethics, so not just throwing tech at it for the sake of throwing tech at it. So I think that conversation will shift. I think it was just worth calling out because there's quite a lot of digital stuff in there, so we'll need to keep a handle on both.
And it's really good that we're getting in the helicopter and, looking across the board in terms of those priorities and what those dependencies. Okay, thank you very much for that. So can't see any more hands up. So thank you very much. We're asked to note and take assurance, which we have. So thank you very much. So moving on to the monthly integrated quality and performance report. So back to you, Matt. So this paper is for assurance.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. So the May and June MIQPR for assurance and discussion. So the report has been reframed around 6 strategic objectives. And you'll see in the annex that brings together a summary against those objectives, the 4-domain balanced scorecard, activity and demand, and the supporting charts and commentary alongside the paper. The report has evolved materially with wider use of SPC and early trajectories, although some indicators and trajectories remain under development, with about 4 or 5 that are yet to be completed. But the central theme is that patient access, ambulance response, handover, workforce capacity and system flow are closely connected. And I think as colleagues have touched on earlier in the meeting, the pressure in one part of that pathway affects timeliness, patient experience, staff wellbeing and productivity elsewhere. So there is progress to recognise. Handover lost hours have reduced significantly year on year. Consultant close has improved over the longer term. The financial position, as we've heard today, is on plan, and several people measures remain stable. But the challenged 18 of the 39 key metrics are red, concentrated particularly in strategic objectives 1 and 4. So they are where the focus remains. Highest risk areas are emergency and orange response, 111 abandonment, stroke and STEMI call to door times, and handover and wait 45. So the report does set out the corrective actions and the relevant executive and operational oversight that is providing scrutiny, challenge and development in those areas. And as I'm sure members will see, several areas depend on action across the wider system as well. So external factors at play to support that. So overall, it's a mixed assurance position. The main drivers are understood, improvement actions are in place, but several core indicators remain below ambition, and important dependencies sit outside the Trust's direct control. So before I ask the board to consider whether the paper, I'm going to ask Lee to join me and share briefly some of the work that's ongoing around the benefits realisation.
Thanks for that. And I think it's opportune, although there is some mention of this in the IMTP CMT section under emergency response, as I'm the exec sponsor for what is phase 3 call flow. Now is a good opportunity, I hope, to just give a little bit more detail about what that work stream's doing, because of course it does have some connections to some of the challenges that Matt's just highlighted. So overall, the purpose of the programme is focused on identifying, prioritising and delivering some of those tangible operational improvements to try and improve flow, as well as optimising our capacity, which, as we openly said, we were labelling as benefit realisation, and that consolidation of some of the model changes that we've made over the last year or two. Over the last month, the programme of work has moved from mobilising itself now into much more of a structured delivery phase. So there is an established governance framework now that includes the programme brief, terms of reference for groups, reporting arrangements, and ultimately escalation routes into the CMT programme board. So CMT programme board, STB offering the oversight, therefore, of this piece of work. During the early phase, we've been deliberately focused on creating these conditions for delivery, ensuring that we've got some clarity on objectives as well as those governance mechanisms. The next stage is going to be important for us, and over the coming weeks, each of the work streams have now been tasked to provide some returns in relation to what improvements they're seeking to achieve, what measurable benefits can reasonably be delivered, and when can we realistically expect those benefits to be realised. The programme is organised around 6 priority work streams, and colleagues will have seen that in the IMTP report. There were 5 original work streams, and they are focused on the breathing difficulty pathway, and incorporated into that is the RCS 0 process and trying to increase the amount of RCS 0 that our clinical navigators can screen before the timeout process commences. the potential of over prioritisation into the orange now category, which I think we would all, or many of us would recognise is perhaps larger as a category than we had envisaged. Door-to-door times, which got some airtime earlier on today, but of course particularly on or focused on stroke and STEMI. A work stream looking at and assessing on-scene times. And lastly, dispatch optimization. And dispatch optimization is quite a broad area of focus, but that's the development of some frameworks to better inform some of the dispatch decisions that are being made and how we're using our resource. In addition to those 5, there's now a 6th, which is covering off the clinical navigation flow to try and deal with some of our emerging concerns in relation to screening delays, queue times, and the capacity of that team. So what I just want to emphasise to the board is that these work streams, they're at different stages of maturity, given we are in the early part of standing up and making this progress. But there is really good engagement across all of the directorates. So we're seeing some good matrix working, developing as we did through phase 1 and phase 2 of this work. There are, of course, some matters of risks that sit around this. Of course, capacity to deliver alongside our operational pressures. And of course, we've just gone through several periods of high temperatures, one of which did require us to prioritise everything to the front line. Capacity of analytical support, because we know that the team is still very much engaged in some other aspects of the transformation programme, some programme and project management capacity, some of our challenges with quantifying benefits, because there are many moving parts. And of course, these work streams are also trying to make progress alongside each other. So some of them have interdependencies, some of them may have unintended consequence. So actually trying to understand all of that and triangulate that is not without its challenge. So personally, I'm encouraged by the progress that's been made initially, but we do now need to get to the point of understanding what the benefits are going to be. And part of that, my last point, is that this is feeding into both the benefit realisation work under the clinical model transformation, some of the productivity work under the financial sustainability approach, is all feeding into what's going to be our winter plan for this year. So one of the primary aspect that work streams have been asked to consider is what are the benefits that we are going to deliver in time for winter, because that's what we clearly need to be targeting and putting through as the organisation's plan for winter. We can then look beyond that as a further phase. So I just thought it was helpful to perhaps just colour in a little bit more about where this piece of work is at.
Okay, and so from a board perspective, will we hear more of an update at our next board meeting in September?
Well, I think what we need to do is, because I say that in terms of governance, we've got the core flow group reporting to CMT, reporting to STB, and therefore I'd anticipate the IMTP paper being the place within which that would come through.
Okay, that's really helpful. So,
sorry, yeah, Carrie, I wanted to ask Andy if it's okay to talk about door-to-door time, because it's been an issue for WAST for a number of years. We've obviously got just this year's data around not achieving that 1.5 hours, and it is something that we are concerned about, and I thought it'd be useful, because also we're in public board, for the public to also understand what we're doing about it. So it's going to bring Andy in.
Yeah, I mean, Lee touched upon it a little bit, but obviously I mentioned it at AGM earlier as well. So what we can look and the illustration I put on the slide earlier at the AGM was essentially when we look at these 3 parts to the call to door time: the call to scene, the on scene, and then the call to destination. And that's what makes the 3. Now, the call to destination, very little can do about that. Simply, the hospital is where the hospital is, the scene is where the scene is. The on-scene time we want to bring down, especially for these things like stroke and STEMI, where actually we want minimal time on scene, faster movement to the hospital. Now, at the moment, the number of stroke units we have across Wales are more than we have the number of heart attack centres. So therefore, because of the greater number of stroke units, most EDs in Wales will deal with strokes at the moment. And so therefore you tend to see a shorter delivery time in terms of getting people to hospital, simply because. And the second part of that is also we have a system where we transmit the ECG for our heart attack patients to the receiving department, and that in itself takes time to then get the authorisation. Now we're working a little bit on reducing that, so as we work more towards the paramedic making the call, and that we're going to go to the cath lab and not wait for permission. We'll just notify them that we're coming. So that in itself should speed up some of the on-scene time in terms of those STEMI patients. But fundamentally, where our biggest challenge is around that call to arrival at scene. And there's a number of factors make that up. And again, you know, not to rehearse what I said in AGM, but it really is a very complex process in that there are so many factors that determine how quickly from the time of call to we arrive. The print is ambulance availability, and is that available ambulance in the right place close to where the patient is? So obviously the journey time from as I say, wherever the ambulance clears, if they're coming from out of area, it inevitably increases that. So I'm hoping the handover 45 will play a big role in improving our call to scene time. But likewise, we do recognise there is a process issue in terms of how we process those calls, both from the time of call through the navigators, potentially into remote integrated care. I'll give you, for instance, of some of the work we've done. So we've identified, through looking at the outcomes and working backwards, there is a specific code within our stroke calls. So a 28 Charlie 0J to give it exact, but we won't delve into the MPDO codes, but it was the J suffix on that code that we've identified as a high prevalence for stroke. Now bear in mind, if we take that code of 28, so all our strokes, only 50% of those patients that were called with a stroke, we arrive and they're having a stroke. So it's not particularly specific, but what we then identified is that 28 Charlie 0J has a higher number of strokes within that specific category. So now that 28 0J goes without navigation, doesn't go through to RICS, goes straight for ambulance dispatch because of a prevalence of stroke within that specific category. Now, we want to do that now a lot more and start to look at how can we process calls straight to dispatch that a bit more faster and accurately based upon what was the clinical evidence, and then work backwards from that. It's immensely time consuming because we're dealing with thousands of records and then starting to look straight through all of those. They're only that manual trawl to be able to identify some of these things, because often the detail is in the written text on the patient record as opposed to a tick in a box at a certain place. So that's the kind of work we do with respect to that. So there's a huge amount of focus on the team. It is probably right up there as number one focus of how do we come faster in identifying those patients and find the needles in that big haystack. So like I said, that's probably the one I'd give as an example.
Okay, thank you. Some good level of authority.
Yeah, can I just come back on that point? So I think what we need is that timeline about how we're going to improve those figures, I suppose, because I can see on the chart things haven't changed for a long time, and look, I know that you know this, but if you can get somebody to the cath lab or you can get that stroke thrombolyzed, they can make a complete recovery. But if you can't get there, the longer you wait, the longer brain matter dies and your heart dies, and then the rehab is affected as well. So it's very, very important we get them, as soon as possible to the right area.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to think, that optimism we talked about, the handover 45, that is probably going to be one of our key determinants, increasing ambulance availability, which in turn is the thing that then drives our ability to have an ambulance in the right place when that incident occurs. It's to an extent outside our control while we influence it as much as we can, but that'll be one of the key determinants. The other bits in terms of trying to identify those patterns in strokes and heart attacks I see it's kind of work in progress, but I think fundamentally it'll be around ambulance availability would be key. So if we do see the improvements in handover 45, then I think we can have a good level of assurance we're going to see improvements in things like that culture.
And actually, one of the things that health boards want us to be able to show is that if they do the heavy lifting to release our ambulances faster, what do they get from it? And of course, what we've said is it's about long community waits, reducing harm, and things that are in this now category. So we've been asked to sort of model or NHS Wales P&I, what we think we are going to offer in return. And whilst we're looking at that about potentially how many patients might we see, we might want to start to actually model in some of the clinical benefits that you're describing, Andy. So actually, if we start to get to more of these patients, what's going to be, what does that look like? So it's not just patients overall, but some specific patients.
I mean, you touched on a key element about the patients we get to. We've got to remember we still have a significant number of patients that cancel. And I think, so our principal measure I'd like us to see is that number of cancellations going down because we are responding to more patients. And that should be the first thing we start to see, that and the extreme weights coming down. And as we then start to move on to actually things like reduction in call to door times. So we have a long way to go in respect to this. As Colin touched upon earlier, we are still double the amount of hours in terms of handover than actually we have the rosters and capacity for. As we see that come down, like I said, those are the key indicators I want to start looking at. What's our unmet need, which is a real critical one for me.
And I mean, your point as well, Umar, is that not all of our charts have predicted trajectories, and this is one that doesn't have a trajectory of future performance. So for me, and you described in the AGM, Andy, a bit about actually if we benchmark how much time we're on scene, we benchmark well. So I wonder if there's a piece of work that we need to do. I don't know whether Quest might want to look at it or CCQG around actually what are the things within our gift, notwithstanding handover 45, and of those things that are within our gift, what do we think they will achieve us in terms of that QI sort of sense and approach?
Yes, I'm up for that. The only thing I'm just going to put a little bit of a word of caution on is the same people that are working on the improvements would then be the same people developing the object. So what I don't want to do is I've been spending time developing the Jetra and taking them away from doing the work. If we can pull that out through the same process, then very much I'm up for that. But like I said, I'm very conscious. What I want to do is improve it. And if I don't want to divert time away from the team doing that.
Can we log an action on that and for you to feedback on it at the next meeting? Yeah.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful context. Any more questions or observations, Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just, in relation to that last conversation, I think it's important just to say that we know what we would anticipate to happen with a return of lost hours, and I talked about this in the AGM, and we should reasonably expect what I talked about in the AGM if we were comparing apples with apples. However, this year is not directly comparable to last year. The climate within which we're operating is different, and with the £9 million saving requirement coming into this year, it required some difficult decisions. And what is going to be very hard for us to be able to do, particularly when it comes to things like setting trajectories, it is understanding the broader consequences of decisions that had to be made in relation to some of our service delivery this year, and that's potentially not directly comparable to the situation that we had last year. So yes, if handover delays improve, instinctively our position, and we saw last year, we responded to more patients, and and those patients waited less time. We absolutely need to do everything in our gift to ensure that when that happens this year, we get the same consequence. And we'll work very hard to do that within everything that's within our gifts. But I do think that we have to recognise that we might be doing that with less capacity this year in comparison to last year. So what we might end up achieving is a lessening of the consequence of some of those delivery decisions that we had to make. So I just think it's important to not forget that the operating context is not directly comparable.
There's a lot of variables, a lot of challenges, but and as Emma said, it's what's within our gift.
Yes.
What's not, but for board, it's really we need to keep in the helicopter, don't we? And the committee is for the heavy lifting.
Hannah's got a hand up. You can't see it.
I cannot see it. No. I'm really sorry.
No, we can't see it at all.
Oh, you
only Alex.
Over to you.
No problem. Diolch yn fawr. I was really interested to see the kind of trajectories in the reports, and thanks to all who have, I know, worked hard on trying to create some visualizations for us. One of the things that I noticed in a few cases is that there's reference to special cause variation. So sometimes a special cause where something has been better than it otherwise might have been, sometimes when it's been worse, but we don't know what the special cause is. Now, I'm mindful of the challenge that colleagues have previously given around us receiving an appropriate amount of detail, not too much, not too little. But it does occur to me that we probably do need to know, even in just a couple of words, what that special cause is, given that it's used in quite a lot of different ways. And I think that does help. Certainly, I think it would help me to interpret what I'm looking at. I wanted to ask a specific question on that with regard to the APP jobs per shift. So when I first joined the board here, we were talking about the role that the APPs would play in what we were then calling most of the time inverting the triangle. So again, treating more people at scene or in the community and taking fewer people to hospital. And the advanced paramedic practitioners were one of the roles that we were particularly excited about in terms of improving the level of kind of skill and the things that people could do. This data shows us that the way that the APPs have been used hasn't been anywhere near to the levels that we would have wanted. And I can see that there are particular remedial plans in place, but they're quite big things. I know, we often look at re-rostering, for example, as a way of improving production, but I suppose I'm wondering how confident, and this is probably a question for Andy, how confident are you that those remedial actions will deliver the degree of improvement we'd want to see? Is there anything else that we should be looking at? And what is that special cause that's been running since April, I think? Because that doesn't map for me against something that I could intuit. So I hope that makes sense as a question. Diolch yn fawr.
Are you okay to take both elements?
Yeah, I can help with that. So in terms of, to go for the first point of your question there, Hannah, in terms of how assured am I that the actions we have in train are going to address this, I'm very assured. With a far greater insight now in terms of the APP deployment and where our shortcomings are in terms of driving that than we've ever had. Funny enough, yesterday at the Benefits Realisation Group, we received a paper from a deep dive that the team have been doing into saying what are the actual issues that's caused this deterioration that we've seen, as you point out, in April, but what are the actions that we then need to do to correct that. So there are a number of factors that we're going to be required to kind of work on in respect to that. But as I said, the fact that we have now far greater insight as to what it is and where the issue is, and there are a mixture of system changes that we've put in and not, not maybe quite understanding some of the untoward impact of doing that and what that would have meant. For example, the choices that our clinicians within RICS make in terms of selecting the time purpose skill. APP as an option hasn't been an option that's been available for them to click on. So there's number one, that we need to make that available so that clinician can make an assessment and choose an APP. Now, this is one of the benefits that we've had the ability to get into now that I've been looking after that remote care space, the ability to line up the urgent care response with urgent care remote into a single function is one of the things I'm going to set the team to work on as we go across. So that's number one of the problem. The understanding we have and therefore how we can correct it is greater than it's ever been. But also, obviously, in autumn this year, we start with the APP scheduling. That will become our principal way to task our APPs. Once we're into that space, we'll be able to put those schedule in. The test of change we did last year in terms of that APP scheduling illustrated that we will be able to drive up the number of jobs per shift these clinicians are seeing, simply because we'll be able to scheduling them in, and they'll spend less time driving from A to B and more time seeing patient and then the next patient and the next patient. So yeah, it's obviously, as you say, it's not where we want it at this point in time, but the level of insight because of that work that's been doing is far better than we've ever had. And I see the plans starting to come into fruition in terms of how we're going to address it.
And I'm assuming that this is also something that's scrutinised at FPC.
I would have thought so, but I don't attend FPC, so.
I think there's so much that we can look at. I don't think that we have actually looked at that yet, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I don't think there's been a focus on that.
Okay.
No, I can't really remember one in late. If we need to, more than happy to take an action and
I mean, it will fall to, because obviously this now has gone into the benefit realisation. That in turn goes through the clinical model transformation board and so on and so forth through that governance. So it will filter it through in terms of those details in that way. So, happy to kind of share the paper outside, and so you can have some greater insight if you want. But actually, it will filter its way through the various.
I think we'll leave that with colleagues. I think that, the integrated governance is there, and we're shifting away from the detail. But I think it just provided a good level of assurance there. Is that okay, Hannah?
Yes, I was going to say, I'm very, very content, for that to go through the channels that it's already set to go through. And I think actually just worth pulling out, to your point, Andy, about the value of bringing together that work to, for you having oversight of that remote work, and us bringing that together. I think that's also going to allow us to be more efficient going forward. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So final words, Johnny.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point off the back of Hannah's comment there around the supported narrative as we start to use SPCs. So as we start to mature this work, and maybe that we bring that through FPC, one of the things we'll want to consider is setting some rules on interpretation. So, special cause traditionally in the NHS would be 8 consecutive data points. 6 would signal a change in trend. Anything below that would be an indicator. So it might be that we want to consider some rules around actually we'll provide that detailed narrative when we're seeing a shift in trend, because otherwise we'll end up providing narrative on any slight movement, and we'll need enough time to lapse to demonstrate that we have seen a statistical change in that result. So it's something we might want to tease out, I think.
So, and you've just reminded me that Rachel was going to deliver a session for us on SPC charts, and I think it was during the critical incident.
Yeah,
so
it was.
I think it'd be really helpful if we
can get that back on a schedule, or even just have it as a standalone hour schedule.
I think it was just for NEDS, but I think it would be helpful, and it should cover that all of its stuff. So yeah, okay.
We can take an action to get that in the diary.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I had a question on. So sorry, not last word, because now as chair I've decided I'm going to take
Chair's prerogative.
So on page 15, I haven't got it in front of me, but on the NRIs, the National Reportable Incidents, it appeared to be a real spike in May, and I just wondered if there was any rationale for that. Is it that some been delayed?
Like I said, sometimes there's a delay in these being reported because we come across them from different angles. Some are directly, some come to light further down the line. So at this moment in time, I'm not aware of a special cause that's caused a certain spike. And often, like I said, it's the timings of when these have come up, we become aware of.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So, we're requested to consider the report, consider if it provides sufficient assurance, if further information is required or remedial action should be undertaken. So I think we've had a good hearing and no more questions. Okay, thank you very much. So moving us on to the committee AAA highlight reports. So the first one today is the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. So Peter, unfortunately, is not with us this afternoon. The report is very clear. Has anybody got any questions or any points they'd like to make? No? Okay. So moving on to the July Finance and Performance Committee. Jane, could you give us a brief overview?
Yeah, I'll just fill in some of the blanks, Chair, if that's okay, because we've already covered a number of items. I think really just going on the assurance side of things. So we covered the finance and the IMTP. We did at this meeting take actually a number of internal audit reports. I think there were 6 in total, if I remember rightly, most of which had been through ARAC already. Others were early sight for that. All were reasonable assurance and were helpful in terms of informing a future, discussion about some future arrangements on bringing some of the infrastructure elements together and report on those, the fire safety and the estates and things, which often are very, well, not fragmented, but they're individual sort of reports. So that was helpful. So committee took assurance from that, looked at the risks as usual, and I think got to a good place in terms of our decarbonisation risk, which has been for while, but committee was more than content really to let that reframing of that risk continue, because we really recognise that decarb, and I think most of the questions raised earlier, I think from the member of the public, it actually is a thread that goes through a lot of our capital projects already, and that's demonstrated in the business cases that come through and the internal audit reports. So that risk was addressed in that way. But that's all I was going to bring out in case unless there's any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, Jane? No? Okay, thank you. So moving us on to the governance report. So this is for approval, Trish?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is just one approval in this governance report. There's been no Chair's actions, and the decisions that we made in private session are set out in the paper. So the approval is to affix the seal, only the seal. We're not asking for approval of the lease, just the affixing of the seal in accordance with our standards. It's on a property in MB. So for the approval of that, we can get it signed up and sealed today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So can I check that we're happy to approve? Yes, approved. Thank you, Trish. So moving us on, there are no consent items today. So moving us on to closing items. So any reflections? And we have been challenged, haven't we, to provide reflections. So any reflections on today's meeting?
Okay. Sorry. No, I was really pleased and actually quite moved by this AJ story. I mean, it was so good, and it really speaks to my thoughts around. It's really important. Appreciative inquiry is just as important as always, focusing on what we can do better. And I think I've really endorsed, taken that through in terms of how can we feed that back. That's such critical feedback to the crews. Spread the word, because it might almost encourage others to actually, I will try something new with a patient, because it's not gone down well. So I think I was really pleased to see that on the agenda.
Thank you. And
No, Jane's just stole them from the talk.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I absolutely reiterate. I said, well, to be fair, it was one of those, there's a hardened, seasoned paramedic there. I kind of got a lump in my throat watching it and thinking, for what an impact that would have made to AJ and onwards from there.
I agree. Emma?
Yeah, I think my reflection is that, we've moved around an agenda, haven't we, that has described us as being a good board, could be a great board. And we've also then talked around being really open about the challenges. So then we had, a presentation here from our colleague that said, actually, a lot of our indicators here are red. And I think a really good, robust discussion around why, and some challenge around, well, you're going to make an improvement, what's it look like? And how are we going to get there? So I think that balance for me probably speaks to why we're a good board, because we're so positive and upbeat and wanting to do well and celebrate the things we do, but recognise that we've got some significant challenges that we need to, as a unitary board, gather around and resolve. These are things that we can't go into another 2 years of things like quarter door being poor. This is all about our patients, and I think that'd be my reflection on today.
Thank you.
And I just had one other reflection, and that is that, you know, we've been challenged through GGI, but, you know, we challenge ourselves before on being more succinct, less detail. And I very much feel that we're on that journey. You know, you look at, just as an example, the MIQPR.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about, you know, a paper reflecting a more strategic context. And that feels really healthy for me in terms of our journey from good to great. So I just want to say thank you to exec on that. And somebody's got their hand up on screen.
Hannah, had your hand up a second ago.
Oh, it's okay. I was also going to reflect on how much we were able to learn from a good news story. I thought that was really, really helpful. And again, to take other people's points around the importance of us seeing information at the right level. And I suppose for me, it's just recognizing that that's still a journey that we're on. You'll notice some of the questions I asked, I sort of said, you know, I'm happy for there to be some pushback around whether I'm asking for too much detail, or, you know, I think that's something that we have to continue to challenge one another about. And of course, you know, for anyone looking in, you know, any of the public sort of watching, also helping people to be able to have confidence that we are getting it right in terms of the level at which we're scrutinising things.
Thank you, Hannah. Trish, and then Estelle.
Yeah, just to your point of the papers are more succinct, they're more strategic. That is going to, as Emma said before, that is going to feel a little uncomfortable for a while because the pack's going to be slimmer. Yeah. So I guess be careful of the things we wish for. And I think if it's coming through like this, it will only be quarterly. It will only be 4 meetings where we're seeing this strategic delivery. We have 6 meetings a year. So those other 2 meetings will be able to focus on the patient or staff story, our financial position, of course, our performance, but also something a bit more deeper, maybe some horizon scanning that's a bit further off, or a collective unitary board deep dive on something. So it is going to feel a little bit light sometimes, and I think that's okay, but I think also challenge us back that, you know, is it robust enough underneath that it's catching some of that? But yeah, I think it's a positive step forward.
I agree, and I think the AAA reports are also very important in this context, because that's where we'll get some of our assurance on. Estelle.
Thanks, Kerry. I suppose just a couple of observations, and it kind of picks up something that both Jane said and Trish said. So on the taking it up a level in terms of strategy, I do think we probably still need to be a bit more discursive about some of that in this forum, because I know we do the line that we've done heavy lifting. But actually, if we're now going to get focused in on that strategy, we do need to discuss that. And you know, this is not a criticism, it's an observation, because obviously moving forward, that's the territory we will get into. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing I wanted to say was, God help us, the MIQPR. We've been on a journey with it, haven't we? And I think you've got me to blame from that, with a conversation with a few of you when I was sitting in the planning seat a year ago. But I do think, you know, I looked at it and thought it's still a 35-slide deck. So there's lots of work for us to do, and we're doing that as an exec team. You know, it'll be a process of gradual refining. And I think that feedback, I know if Rachel was here, she'd be saying, well, you know, keep giving that feedback on, is it hitting the mark? In those 35 slides, are we picking out the right things? Are we able to pick out the right things when we're in the conversation? Because it is a lot of information. It's all valid. It's all there. It's all important stuff. And it will vary, won't it, by meeting? There'll be times when we want to go down this particular rabbit hole, and in other meetings we'll want to go down this particular rabbit hole, depending on what we've heard. So I just wanted to, I know it's been a huge amount of work for the team on doing more work on that and trying to get it into a space. So I think it's just that constant feedback, so we can iterate and get it to the place where it ultimately will need to be.
Thank you. Okay, so that's lots of really good reflections today. Okay, so I haven't been notified of any other business. Just a quick check if there's anything on the table. No. So now I'm going to be moving us on to exclusion of the press and members of the public, to invite the press and public to leave the meeting because of the confidential nature of the business we will be transacting of the Public Bodies Act 1960. Okay, so date and time of next meeting is the 24th of September. at 9:30. And just to remind any members of the public who are watching, we really do welcome questions. So please make a note of that date. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.